That's a funny story how that channel was born. It was COVID and we're all staying at home. And I was thinking to myself, all right, challenge accepted. Let's do it.
Hello, guys, and thanks for joining us today. Today, we're talking with Reza Sarkamari about education in VFX and movie graphics. We're discussing how do you get hired by a big studio and talking about passion.
Greetings and welcome to the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. In each episode, host Kirill Tokarev invites video game industry leaders to talk about the world of game development. No topic is off limits as long as it relates to video game development. New episodes are in the works, so remember to follow us or subscribe and share with someone you know will also enjoy the podcast.
Maybe we can start with like a little kind of look. I'm gonna tell you like my opinion, then maybe you can bounce off it. So I talk with a lot of video game developers everywhere, and especially I hear this a lot in the United States. And the thought is basically that kind of the education, I'm not saying like 100%, but often, let's say often, right? Education for creatives, and especially people who want to work in games or film or motion graphics, it doesn't work 100% all the time. And what I hear from people who are kind of learning or studying is that it doesn't basically costs a lot, and it's very hard to kind of get that money back and pay off the student loan and all that stuff. And what I see is that more and more people are kind of gradually embracing everything online. Going online courses, going to YouTube a lot, and so on. And my question is, why do you feel this is happening? And what are like the main reasons for people to kind of shift from like more traditional spaces where they usually learn about 3D into kind of more kind of guerrilla style of education?
That's actually a very good question. I had an interview with Autodesk last month, and almost the same question came up. It's a question I actually get a lot from my own students in the class. Self-education is preferred by many, of course, because you create your own timeline. You don't need to worry about deadlines and milestones. And you just focus on what you want to learn and remove the rest. However, self-educating can be a double-edged sword as well, in my opinion. If you look at tertiary education, it is important to learners' growth, but more importantly to their transferable skills. We're talking problem solving. We're talking critical thinking, how to resolve conflicts within a team. To bring an example would be self-awareness. It's not something that you gain by self-educating. It has a regulatory role here to help us view ourselves, to help us see our actions, our approach to deadlines and job objectivity. And it's not something that you gain by watching YouTube. Flexibility is another example. If as a learner you're unable to adapt to various demands imposed by the environment, you won't be able to make your client happy, regardless of how much you know. If you cannot embrace the change, which again circles back to that transferable skills, it kind of defeats the purpose. And that's why when I have this conversation with my students, I try to be very clear that it's not just about what button to press, it's about learning how to be part of a team, how to resolve conflicts. I always say that our time in class is limited. We cannot talk about everything in the classroom as educators, not to mention that many educators are specialized in certain things. So I say look at these YouTube videos as instructional videos, as pre and post activities, just to push the envelope. If you would like to know more about a certain topic, that would be the time to kind of dive right in and do a bit of a self-education. It becomes quite important at some point when learners want to reach a level where they watch a workflow and they connect the dots. That's where I would say instructional videos on YouTube is great, because, or any other platform is great, because you already have that foundation. You look at the workflow and you're like, all right, I know the basics, I know the ground rules, I'm just going to connect the dot, and eventually you create your own method, and that's how you grow as an artist. So in many schools, I'm a department coordinator at SAE. My focus is mostly on soft skills when we get to our studios, when students collaborate with each other. And I always say, leave the technical difficulties as the last concern. We deal with it later. That's why you have me. That's why you have the internet. That's why you have each other. But the transferable skills is something that we really focus on, because at the end of the day, when you start your journey in a studio, clients want to get the job done fast, and they want this to be done on time. Again, transferable skills, very, very important factor in education. I think that's the whole concept behind studying as an animator, because it really doesn't matter if the end goal is to be a lawyer, to work in a medical field, or want to be an animator. There are certain skills that you need to gain behind the scene, soft skills, to make you a better person, to understand the importance of time, so on and so forth. So I usually, that's how I answer these questions in a classroom. And it's a very popular question, why we should study.
I think I heard one businessman, and he said that there's this concept right now that kind of hard skills are kind of, like they're taking kind of like a back seat, right? And you need to communicate more, all this like a HBR kind of stuff, like you need to communicate with the team, be clear in your conversations, communications, and so on. And when I have projects that kind of push me in the direction where I need to communicate with people that are not on my, not in my like a brain hemisphere, like in there, like I'm kind of more on the like creative side, and I need to talk with, coders, and sometimes it's incredibly challenging because they think in a quite different manner, and whenever I say to them, they feel like this is, gibberish that doesn't make sense to them, And I like what you said, that especially like in games where you have like tech people and you have artists, making them work together, it's quite a challenge. And maybe just going in this journey alone and trying to do everything on your own and trying to get those hard skills on your own, you might get somewhere, but at the same time it won't get you this experience, working in a team, communicating, having conflicts. Although we try to think that we don't really have them in the workplace, or try not to have them, they still happen, right? And especially, like you said, when you're working with clients and so on. But again, coming back to that businessman who mentioned the the kind of the hard skills taking the back seat, he also said another thing. He said that if you feel that way, try to go to a surgeon who's going to help you, and it's going to be a great client-oriented surgeon, but he's not going to be the best in his hard skills, right? You start having like a different point of view. So I guess to kind of jump off from that question is, can you tell us how does YouTube help you, get those hard skills that can help you kind of grow as an artist, as an animator, and try to be a better specialist?
I mean, to me, YouTube was just a platform, that learners can dive into. Obviously, I worked in this industry for 17 years exactly. And as an educator, I have a message. I almost retired around 2007, started my study at Sydney University, and then found my passion in teaching around 2000, 2009, 2010. So it's been 12 years that I've been teaching, dealing with or working with very, very talented students. So as an educator, I have a message, and I have something to share, and YouTube kind of gave me that platform to connect with my audience and to share my findings. What I also would like to, the way that I would like to look at YouTube is a community hub where everyone shares information. I've had scenarios where my subscribers at times say, well, Reza, this method is great, but have you tried the other method? And I was thinking to myself, wow, that is fantastic. That's exactly what I want to see. I mean, they care enough to spend the time and to connect with the audience and to share. It's not just a one-way street. I do teach and I also learn, which is fantastic. So that community hub is really my end goal. And again, circles back to how I run a classroom. I don't want to be the guy who sits in front of everyone else and talks for 2 hours. I would like to bounce ideas off of students and also learn at the same time, because we're all sharing the environment, we're sharing knowledge, and there are times where my students are proactive enough to dive deep into a particular topic and come back with some findings, and it's just exhilarating to have a look at that. I'm like, wow, that is fantastic. And you just imagine working with different artists over the years. Obviously, I was thinking to myself, well, that's the time to start with this YouTube journey, which kind of how it was born was a funny story. But yeah, that's a platform for me to communicate with my audience and to share really my findings with people all around the globe, which has been a bless.
I really like this idea about the community, because when we work with our kind of readers on 80 level, we feel the same way. We don't feel like we're, like my philosophy is that I'm probably the last person they should listen to, right? I'm not there to kind of teach them how to do 3D. I'm not a professional 3D artist, but our goal is to find people who can share something interesting in this field, right? And building that community for us on during the first kind of years of our journey as a media company, that was the most important thing, because we thought that if we have that kind of core people who like us and understand what we're doing, then it would be easier for us to build a bigger audience. And so how did you kind of approach it? Tell us this story, how this YouTube channel started, and how did you start kind of amass the following, and what were like the main, stages, I guess, in your growth?
That's a funny story how the channel was born. The short answer is by accident. The slightly longer version is I did a Zoom masterclass for SAE Amman campus. I think it was about fluid simulation back in April 2020. It was COVID and we were all staying at home, and I had this offer from SAE Amman that, students would love to kind of have 3-4 hours on that particular time frame. And that time frame, because I live in Sydney, Australia, it was like 2 a.m. in the morning. And I was thinking to myself, all right, challenge accepted, let's do it. So I did the master class, and student asked me if I could upload the content to a website or platform, so they could go back and review the steps and watch the whole thing. So I did. I uploaded everything on my YouTube channel, which didn't have a name back then, and probably had one video and like 8 subscribers. They're all my students. And yeah, I uploaded my video. I went to bed right after, and the next day, I had messages. And I started reading the first few, and even that was enough to make my day. And that motivated me to start. And I was thinking to myself, well, I've got something to share, and this platform looks fantastic, but that made this inner circle of my subscribers bigger and bigger. Now, what I cover usually, what I focus on, I try to have a focus, obviously, but what I focus is on computer graphics. I talk about methods, I talk about walkthroughs. I tend to target well-established software packages that I've worked in the past, such as like Maya, Painter, Unreal, Marvelous, Nuke, so on and so forth. But because I get subscribers who also participate, they actually contribute to the richness of the content. All in a sudden, one topic evolves to a completely brand new topic where subscribers, students, learners, they actually talk about different methods, and one walkthrough or one particular technique comes out of it. And that makes me curious that, that to me seems like the next logical step. So why don't we look into that next time around? And it's just incredible to see how this journey, this platform is running by itself. It's kind of shaping and giving me the clues for where to next. And it's all because of all the artists who are contributing to this online platform. And that shows how much learning has changed. The traditional learning, the way that we used to know it, has changed, because it's all about bouncing ideas off each other. It's all about communicating. Again, transferable skills playing a massive role in here, where we just need to put our ego aside and come to a realization that we all have our own experiences, and we cannot move forward. The only way to do it is by sharing it. And once you share your knowledge and receive something in return, you realize that, oh my goodness, okay, that's the part that I missed, or that would be the one that I'm going to look into next time around. And that's how it's been since its launch in 2020. I mean, the channel is fairly young, but I'm having lots of fun with it. I mean, I'm a full-time employee at SAE, but any time I get, every single minute of my personal time, usually at the end, goes to that YouTube channel, because it really keeps me refreshing. It gives me the opportunity to have that mingling time, to have that communication with my audience and to learn a thing or two. So it's been absolutely fantastic.
And I think it's also, first of all, I think you're very lucky in terms of like when you explain this, when you tell this story, when you publish something online, and then the next day there are comments and reactions, and that's kind of like this aha moment that you want to have when you're starting anything, right? Because more often than not, you do a lot of work, you upload something, and then there's nothing. There's like, that's the worst possible thing. And I also want to say that it's also very rewarding when you're talking with the community and you're having conversations and this exchange. It's it's a great feeling to share this knowledge with the audience and get something in return and kind of exchange this, techniques and all that stuff. But talking about techniques, and you mentioned Maya and Nuke and all the other tools out there. So I'm gonna tell you my journey through 3D tutorials, how it sometimes happens. So because I work at 80 level, I need to understand, how this package works, that package works. So usually I end up on YouTube looking for people to explain how this or that works. And sometimes I have these situations where you see a YouTuber or an instructor and he just tells you, A, B, C, D, E, the steps. And you go through steps and, anything. It could be like Photoshop or anything. You go from one point to another, and in the end you get something and you're super proud of yourself. But in reality, you have no idea how you got there. It's like they're taking you by the hand and they walk you around some tool, and then you're kind of left alone and you realize that you don't know anything. You don't really know how to operate this thing. And for one thing, it's those tools, they are super complicated, right? The stuff that you have right now, I know, like Unreal Engine or Houdini or Nuke or even Maya, which is like has thousands of plugins, a lot of stuff there. The question is, what's your kind of method? How do you kind of teach the tool as if it were, paints and brushes, and that's it? Like, what's your philosophy there?
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because, this can be one of the misconceptions about 3D. One of the biggest ones is the importance of project planning and the amount of research that needs to be done before you start with the tools. So diving into practical step-by-step tutorial without knowing the ground rules can be very misleading, and it does happen, where students look at the cover of the video and they're like, wow, waterfall, I would like to do waterfall. But what they may miss is the theory and the basics, that the thought process that goes behind that tutorial before you start pressing that button. So that's why when I was talking about transferable skills, I actually mentioned critical thinking, because really you need to think about, do I know enough to sit behind the wheels right now? Because, the idea of driving, figure of speech, and the driving experience itself can be a very different thing. It is surprising when, ones think they know the technique simply because they memorize the steps as opposed to understanding it. That can be very, very misleading. That's why in many of my tutorials, I start off by showing reference images or how body deforms if it's a rigging tutorial, just to reiterate that part of the workflow, that even though we know what we're about to do, you still need to do your study first. If it's an effect that you're trying to create, just go out and see if you can film it. If you're a sculptor, focus on the anatomy first. If you're a lighter, study color theory first, possibly photography. If you're an animator, be observant and gather reference for every single move. And those steps just help you to be prepared for any surprises that may occur along the way. In my videos, at least 1 or 2 chapters at the beginning, I don't open the application. I just talk about references. If we're trying to create dust, what would be a typical dust in that scenario look like? How much density are we talking about? That allows the viewer, the learner, to improvise later on if we change the question. Because the problem that you run into when you memorize the steps is there is like a 2% chance that outside that environment you get the exact same scenario. You always get something slightly different. Now, if you understand the ground rules, if you understand the basics, if there is no memorizing going on, and it's just, now I know why I clicked this button, why I ran that tool, then that allows the learner to just get creative and enjoy the process, as opposed to, the tutorial didn't work, or I'm not really too sure where to next. So project planning and doing your study before you dive into the tool, before you get your hands dirty, is very, very important. I'm really glad you brought it up.
I really like that answer as well, because I talked with the CEO of Beyond FX, and Beyond FX, it's like they're doing a lot of VFX for games and film, and they're specialized in real-time VFX. And he told me a funny story when kind of a client, anyone, they send them a brief, and the brief, usually the client doesn't really know. I mean, sometimes they do, but usually they don't really know what they want. And they just send the brief, and it says, well, I need a blue electric explosion. Like I need it by Monday or something, right? And it's like, he's saying, sure, I'll do it. But then he kind of goes to and starts, gathering references and figuring out what the hell does that mean? Like what kind of explosion and where it's going to be used and all that. And it's great that the stuff that you're saying, it basically prepares you for like the real world, because never in the history of time have they gave you a task which was 100% what you saw in a tutorial. Because obviously there's going to be something different. Even if you're specializing in some very niche thing, like you're only doing like hard surface modeling, or you're only doing like animal animations somewhere, there's still going to be so many variables that it's just going to be impossible to figure this out if you don't really go from like the basics, like you said, the references, the anatomy, like the color theory, all those kind of building blocks that help you become kind of a better artist in general. And having worked with students, having worked with a lot of clients in general, how do companies today, how do they look kind of for great artists to work with? Like what are the things that they first look, they look at the first and the second and the third stage and so on? Is it soft skills? Is it hard skills? Is it particular tools that you need to know in order to land a job, or it's mostly, they are looking for some kind of star that can do everything?
Yeah, that's a very popular question that I always get from my students. What's the magic recipe? What's the formula for us to land the job? So as a junior, as a learner, a junior artist, I always say, work on your portfolio, know enough about yourself to put together relevant content in your portfolio. So if you want to be an animator, don't showcase a radio model that you did 2 years ago, because your audience may not like it. Always think about your audience. Chances are in the panel there will be an animator, an animation supervisor, someone in the department if you're interested in animation, maybe no one from modeling department. So know your audience and try to sort of tailor your portfolio based on the role. And I always say that don't compare yourself to seniors. That's the most intimidating thing that juniors can go through, and it's traumatizing to look at the professional reels coming out of a studio. First of all, it's not a solo job, it's a teamwork. There are stages into that piece which can be very intimidating, but also those guys have 20 years, 30 years of experience under their belt if you want to start. And if you go for an interview, whoever is interviewing you does understand that. So the most important thing is to have relevant content in your demo reel and be confident. Know enough about yourself to know that you deserve this shot. And that's why seeing that confidence is equally as important. Again, soft skills, to be able to sell your product, to be able to showcase your capabilities, to have the confidence to say, well, I do know this, but I don't know this, but I'm willing to learn. And I always say to my students, be brave. You have absolutely nothing to lose. And if they see the confidence, that your confidence will impress them. Of course, you need to have the right content in your portfolio, but it's always a good balance between the technical side of things and the soft skill. If you're too, egocentric, or maybe come off as, I really want this, you got to give me the job, they kind of see through that and you may lose the opportunity. So be humble at the same time, be confident. I remember I had a student, I think it was back in 2012, and a recruitment team from Rising Sun in Adelaide actually came over to the university to look at their students' demo reel and to give them feedback. And they looked at one portfolio in particular. She was one of my best students in the class, and they were very impressed. And they started asking questions. All of a sudden, that feedback session turned to an interview session. But I would just love the way she handled the situation, with a smile, patient enough to answer all the questions. And the team was like, oh, we want her. She's fantastic. We're looking for a modeler, and she seems like the right candidate. And I remember that she started as a junior modeler and then became senior modeler. And later on, she became a department supervisor. And at some point, she actually offered me a job to work with her. It was really, really rewarding. I mean, after all these years, she still thought of me as her to-go person. And that's what happens in teaching in general. You get to be surrounded with love, which is fantastic. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that initial spark, that confidence, that soft skill improvement can really take you a long way.
You know what? I can't agree more with this, because there are two examples that kind of jump to mind when you talk about this. I went to GDC, like I think a couple of years ago, and I used to go to a booth of this school where, because they shared all the cards of all the students, and the students always had very good work. And I was lucky enough to meet kind of some of the students there, and they were like super happy to meet me because they know 80 level, and we talked. And there was this girl that was like super open, like very nice to talk to, you know, like she was kind of like easy to be around. And she had great work. She was like an environment artist, and I think now she works at Naughty Dog, and she's been working for a couple of years, and she's kind of growing there, and she contributed to like all the Last of Us franchise, all the like these huge games, and the growth is tremendous. And I thought at that time that they're not just making this choice based on whatever she has on ArtStation, yeah. Right? They make this choice because they think that this person is going to be around other people, and nobody wants to be around the person that's like too stuck up, or you know, too much of a like a rock star or something, right? They want to have a person that they can exchange opinions with and so on. And the next example is the same guy who worked. He's actually from Donetsk, and he moved to, I think, Belarus, and he worked at Wargaming, and he was doing these amazing environments for World of Tanks. And again, like you look at those environments and you think, well, they only hired him because he's just like a great environment artist. But when you talk to him, you understand that he's just like a very nice, chill person to be around with. He's like, you know, again, super open, talkative, he's like a problem solver, and all of the other things, you don't really see them when you look at the portfolio, right? And exactly. It's super important to have all that. I know that like for a lot of juniors, it's not really a lot of help. Like it's like, what's your advice? Is to be a good person? But the idea is that you need to have something extra there, right? Yes. In order to land a job in a place like, you know, like DICE or some other big studio, or like Sony Santa Monica, because like the line there is crazy. If you go to like any big studio, any big place, like even you went to work at NVIDIA or Intel, where they create demos like in 3D, and there's like thousands of people applying, literally. They're like, they go through hundreds of thousands of resumes, and yes. It's very challenging to, you know, stand out, and like your portfolio probably is going to be just like the first step, right? And then the starting point. You kind of build on top of that. But while we're talking about kind of recruiting and kind of work in this industry, you mentioned that you worked for a long time. And what do you think were the major changes kind of that happened in the industry at that time? And how do you feel they're gonna influence the future changes? And I'll explain what I mean, like tools, the availability of tools, the availability of learning aids, the studio's kind of openness, all those elements. Like, how do you feel they influence overall kind of this field?
I mean, these days there are various systematic pathways for 3D enthusiasts to help them with their education, to train them in 3D domain, the area that they're interested in. I remember back in my time, I mean, I'm talking early 90s, we had close to no resources. We didn't know really where to go and how to start. we had software manuals just to go through, software manuals this thick, just to go through to make sense of the tool, to understand the tool. But flash forward to right now, I mean, all you need to do is to narrow down your interest at what you want to do and sign up for a course. Of course, that we don't assume that's all there is to it, but at least you're off to a good starting point, right? So that's the biggest difference, in my opinion, from, we're talking early 90s. And here's another thing, in early 90s, studios were still developing pipelines. Really, there were no cemented, tested pipelines. For example, ILM had to go through a brand new pipeline to understand, all right, how we incorporate or blend a live action plate with CG elements. It was new back then, but so many techniques and tricks have been tried since then. And because of that, we're in a really great position where it's perfect timing actually to learn and to be a star, because everything has been tried before. We've got tested, well-established pipelines in studios. Of course, we expect development, we expect change in the future, but the level of customizability and the amount of tests that have been done behind the scene makes learner jobs a lot easier to adapt, to be able to narrow down their focus so they can kind of take things to the next level. About where the current 3D world is going, that's a $1 million question. We're talking metaverse, but we always need to kind of remember that metaverse is just a term to describe the next significant paradigm in our digital technologies and networks. So it's just a digital space. How we are going to use it, who knows? Major technology companies like Apple, Google, the meta platforms like Facebook, even Microsoft are developing their own interpretation of the tech these days. So anything can really happen in the future. I'm actually very excited for it. I personally would like to see work that makes AI more accessible. That would be fun. Creating powerful deep learning models just to accomplish things with complexity, things that no human can achieve. I mean, I was reading an article the other day, and some research groups have started with deepfake in real time, and the end goal is to use it in simulation and in games, computer games. So like that level of optimization while you maintain photorealism is just mind-boggling. We look at even today's technology with UE5 already started with Nanite and Lumen and MetaHuman, virtual production on the rise. So much is going on. But that's the thing with today's technology and how rapidly it develops. We may have this conversation 5 years from now, and you may say, what are you talking about, Reza? I just bought a set for friend's birthday that does all of it. It just makes everything obsolete.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's like you don't notice those jumps as you kind of live through, but if you go back a little bit, like a couple of years, and you look at the stuff that was created back then, you'll be amazed. Because I had this experience. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I'm kind of trying to give her a little bit more of content with some kind of story, and not just like this, regular baby movies. And I watched Zootopia with her from Pixar. And I remember at that time, Zootopia was kind of like the pinnacle of what you can achieve technically on a computer, right? And I'm watching this film, and it's like I'm professionally deformed. Like I can't enjoy films like I used to. So I'm like watching this film, and I start noticing like the lighting is off, or the fur doesn't look that good, or like the liquids, they don't really feel real, or like the animation is off here and there. And then I stop and I think to myself, oh my God, man, what are you talking about? This is like a great looking film, right? But I think the bar just gets so high, and especially in, in animation, right? Because you look at stuff that you see in the cinema right now, like I think this Spider-Man Multiverse, an animation film.
Yes.
That was totally crazy. When I was watching that in the cinema, I thought this kind of content would never make it to the big screen, right? And the stuff that's kind of Netflix is doing and all that other, like the bar is incredible. And I guess to kind of like my final question is how do you keep up as a professional? Like, how do you make sure that you're not, you're not using techniques that are old? Maybe like there's something better that creates better visual fidelity. How do you make sure that you're kind of on top of things?
I would say the secret sauce is passion, because if you look at it as a job, it gets tiring really fast and it wears you out. It's impossible to keep up if you look at it as a job. I'm one of the blessed ones who I look at this as a hobby. I try to chase this just to satisfy my inner itch. I work with thousands of students over the years, and we talk about driving factors, but without oversimplifying, there are kind of 2-3 main driving factors amongst learners. The first one is actually curiosity, where you're in hot pursuit of accomplishing their passion, developing your skills. You want to gain knowledge. You want to know more because you have that inner itch. That's kind of an intrinsic motivation, if I may. I also work with many students, past and present, talented students actually, who want to push themselves through the limits to gain a type of reward, praise and grades, I call them, which is fair enough. But I think the best possibility, best of both worlds, would be the third possibility, where you care about your time and you care about your financial compensation, but at the same time you're passionate about what you do, which is a golden mix. So you don't need to worry about how will I earn money, or you don't have any financial problems. Your time management is there. At the same time, you have the passion to move forward, and that gives you the patience to hang in there, and not only to move forward, but also to contribute to today's technology, to be able to think about possibilities outside of this norm and create something original. I always say to my students that, all right, look at references, look at different types of lighting, look at different types of modeling, but also think about how you can put your own spin to it, how you can make it look more interesting. Now, with someone with no passion, he or she may say, leave me out of this. But someone with passion and with motivation, if you really love what you do, then you get curious. You get that inner itch, and you'll be like, all right, I'm just going to give it a try. I'm not sure if I'm going to be successful, but I'm going to give that a try. And that that is a good starting point. That's what I'm looking for in my students. And I always say, stay curious. Always stay curious. If you think, all right, you need to spend some time, personal time outside the classroom, do it. If you think you need to sort out the financial side of things on the side, do it. But don't lose that curiosity, because with that, a lot of things will go away. It's not an easy industry to be in. And in order to survive, you really need to have that curiosity as a motivation and as a drive to push you forward and for you to go to places.
Reza, I don't have anything to add except that we're running out of time. And I want to thank you for your time and sharing all your knowledge with this recording. And for everyone interested, we're gonna leave links in the description so you can check out the YouTube channel, subscribe, and enjoy the videos. Thank you so much for your time once again, and hope we'll talk sometime in the future.
Thank you. I would like to thank you and your audience for the great opportunity, and hope to talk to you guys again.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP. And share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.